obviously abundance is amazing, but it also there's the dark side of it.
Meet 𝐀𝐻𝐥. She has spent years on the front lines of technology revolution, experiencing everything from the earliest Teslas to home solar setups, and she saw the industry revolution firsthand. So today we are looking at how these technologies are actually changing your family's budget and your freedom. In this episode, Kim and I discuss why switching to electric transportation is about much more than just saving the planet. It's about saving your most valuable asset, and that's time. Then we talk about the Tesla effect, what Kim learned from being an early adopter that most Wall Street experts missed, and then how to stop being a victim of rising costs and start producing your own power. If you're wondering how to take advantage of these big changes in the age of abundance, you need a plan. Later in this video, I'm going to show you how to get a step-by-step guide that helps you start the transition to being a high conviction investor in just 90 days. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ideal Investor Show. 𝐀𝐻𝐥. Kim, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I mean, we're basically making the recording here on kind of like earnings eve, if there's something like that, where Tesla is going to report the earnings for the year 2025 as well as for the last quarter that are supposed to start coming out from a product or service side at Tesla in 2026. Could you say, in which order you would say this is what I'm most excited about, and then maybe next that and this and so forth?
I mean, it's definitely Optimus, I think, is definitely where the future is headed. Has so much to do with AI and this, being able to have anything that you want right there in front of you. That's really the future. And it's, when you think about Optimus, it's so much more than the humanoid robot, really. It's how everything will be connected. This whole AI ecosystem with Grok in your car, in your vehicle, or robo-taxi, and then in your home. And it's just that ecosystem, I think. So it's hard to say one thing or another because I think so much of it is connected. And I think that the future is going to look very different than how we live our lives day to day right now. And that's the vision that Tesla sees.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from these different technologies, my impression has been the last couple of years, and maybe wrongfully thinking about it that way, that certain things I thought would have come out a little bit more step by step. To me, it feels right now like 2026 feels like it kind of bunched together, right? Like semi and the introduction of Roadster and Optimus and unsupervised FSD and Robotaxi and so many things all in one year. Do you think that maybe Tesla could be overdoing it?
Um, I don't think so because I think, like I said, I think a lot of it is really connected and they're looking at the larger picture of everything. I think some of the things that we thought were going to be these huge priorities with Tesla and from a vehicle standpoint, maybe are not going to be priorities in the future because the future is going to be so different than how life is right now. And I think that's what they're thinking of in terms of like the larger picture of it all. So they've made these promises of things like the Roadster and the Semi, but I think that is just, from what we're going to need, it really has to do more with like self-driving. I think that's a big part of like, um, a lot of people are upset right now with um, FSD versus autopilot and everything going away and having it be like you have to have either. It's an all or nothing scenario. But I think Tesla is gambling on this future and they're kind of putting in all their chips and they're saying, once you experience this, it's really going to be that like iPhone moment of where you can't go back anymore because this is something that once you experience it, you're going to enjoy it so much that you won't imagine ever living without it. And so that's really where they're going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just for those in the audience who don't follow this so super tightly in every minutia, Teslas that you can buy literally today come, depending on exactly what trim and stuff that you buy, they come with a version of autopilot. But you can also, and still till next month, I think you have the option to buy a certain form of full self-driving, which is basically you click a button after you put in a destination and the car is taking you there. And your role, at least for now, is to supervise that it does everything right. And so what they recently announced is to say, okay, we believe that we have solved the capability for a car to drive itself safer than a human. So yes, you can obviously always supervise it, but very quickly and very soon it will basically be capable of doing it. And maybe the regulators allow you to watch your phone, send text messages, even theoretically sleep in the car, and it's still like a taxi takes you. To me, actually, what I find kind of interesting, and I know there's this big overhang of safety, but when I looked at this first and I saw all this churn in the media, especially in the kind of like on X and stuff on YouTube, to me it was really the conscious decision to say, how much do I really want to drive myself? And how much do I maybe not want to drive myself or have a benefit of not having to drive myself? I take my own example, based on where I typically am. I looked the last few years, I may be driving 4,000 or 5,000 miles a year. And that's relatively limited. And when I drive, it's mainly either because I want to go somewhere. It's not in a hurry, it's not to work, it's not commute, it's none of that. Or just because we want to explore an area that we haven't been at for a while and we want to drive kind of through it. Would I really see a need for FSD for that? No, not necessarily. Yes, I understand the safety component, but other than that, I like driving. I've almost a flawless accident record. I'm not driving in a hurry or super tired. So I might be one of those cases where I might say, yeah, I buy the car, I don't need FSD or autopilot or any of that kind of stuff. As soon as it switches to I have to commute 100 miles a day or something like that, obviously I would rather theoretically sit in the back seat and work on something, then. So what do you think about this? What is the
I,
decision that people have to make?
I think there's a lot of people that are probably in the same boat as you and kind of that's their way of thinking. But I also think once they start using it day to day, there's going to be a shift. Because we've had full self-driving and we've kind of experienced this, where it's gone in the last 10 years. And it was at the point where, a lot of times a few years ago, we didn't really use it very much when we drive, but now I use it everywhere I go. The only time I drive for myself is when I'm testing a vehicle that's really fun to drive and I want to drive for sport. It's like
Yeah.
going from like using horses to get around to horseback riding for sport. I think that's where we're going to be going with vehicles, and Tesla knows it. And they're betting big on that by kind of like forcing people now that if they want to have any kind of um, safety features in terms of driving, that they have to get full self-driving because they know once people start using this day to day, they're really going to enjoy it more than they thought that they would. Um, and I think they're betting big on that. And I see it too because there's been a huge transition just for me using it day to day. And I'm just using it a lot of times, driving a few miles from my house, but it's nice. It sort of is like, okay, I'm just going to the grocery store, but I use it. And during that time, you might be listening to a podcast or whatever. It's nice not having to focus in so much. Now, I will say there's a big difference between our vehicle that has hardware for full self-driving with the latest tech and hardware 3. I know it's a big difference. So
Right.
people are thinking about, oh, I've tried full self-driving in the past and it wasn't that great. There is a difference between the newer vehicles that are coming out and the latest hardware.
One thing I honestly have thought about, and I'm thinking we will get there, and then we can get off that topic. But in a way, I could see some option where not only have it as a subscription month to month, but also maybe have it related to the mileage that you're actually putting on it. That might also be something where this whole payment model could still evolve a little bit, right?
Mhm.
If you apply the safety aspect and say we want to save 40,000 people not dying per year, it might be that there is no option anymore, that if you have it, you have to have it, right? And it might be actually integrated into the price rather than a separate service. Who knows where it's going? So,
Well,
you know,
I don't think people are going to be driving. Like people are just
yeah,
not going to
that's the
be
other thing.
driving
Yeah. Right.
anymore. Like people will own cars when they have a family and they have kids, and they have a lot of stuff that they're using day to day, but they're not going to be driving. Like we're gonna have a huge change. And you can think of it like, like smartphones, or you can even think of it like you said, seatbelts, or um, even like backup cameras, that are now required. And we're so used to using our backup cameras when we back up. But when I first started driving, I didn't have that. And I think about it now and I'm like, wow, I was just sort of like blindly looking behind me. I can't imagine that like I did that. Like,
Yeah.
how do we all do that? And like, I think we're going to think about driving in a similar way. Like, wow, we used to all just like drive ourselves places. I think it's going to be a quick change. Like, it's going to be so fast, so fast. I was driving around, um, I was with a friend in an older vehicle that was like a 2010 vehicle last week. And I was looking at the tech and thinking, well, 2010 wasn't that long ago. But I'm like, technology has changed so fast. And the rate at which it's changing has increased even more. Like, it's hard to even like conceptualize how quick this is going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of compare this, or at least anticipate it to be somewhat similar with we have what happened with the COVID thing, where we suddenly, at least for me, I can say it switched to 100% work from home. If you would have asked me in 2018, 19, if I could imagine every day, all year long, year after year, to basically almost exclusively work from home, I would have said, no way. I mean, like I was traveling a lot and all that kind of stuff. So it was pretty much unimaginable until it happened. And now it feels like more like a burden if somebody said, hey, can we meet in person? Well, yeah, I know we can, but do we really have to, kind of thing, So I think you're right at that. Now, you mentioned family and kids and so forth. If you don't mind me asking, how old are your kids?
So I have three children. My oldest is almost 14. He's an eighth grader. And then I have a fifth grader that's 11. And then I also have a 5-year-old that's in
Okay,
kindergarten.
cool.
So I have the spectrum.
Yeah, well, since this is an investing show originally at least, I'm kind of curious from an investing perspective, do you put anything aside for them?
Oh yeah, we definitely
Okay.
do. My husband actually handles a lot of that. But we definitely have put away money for them. Um, One of the funny things, is
A common question I get from our community is, Axel, this is great, but how do I actually start building a portfolio for myself? Whether you're just starting out or you're an expert looking to pivot into real estate, stocks, or crypto, we've built the blueprint for you. It's our free 90-day wealth growth plan, your step-by-step checklist. If you're building foundation from scratch and if you have some momentum but you want to scale, it's completely free. All you have to do is scan the QR code up here somewhere on the screen or click the first link in the description to join our Substack. Once you subscribe, we'll send the full 90-day guide straight to your inbox and start the 90-day countdown. Now let's get back to the interview.
we didn't necessarily start traditional like 529 accounts with them. Instead, we started investment accounts for them. I
Right.
wasn't sure where they would end up going, if the future would necessarily mean going to college or university right after high school. And I wanted to give them options for what they wanted to do in life. So, um,
Okay.
we've definitely thought about that for all three of them.
Yeah, very cool. Now, do you know or have your husband told you where he's putting the money for them?
Um, it's definitely in the areas you could probably guess, without getting too specific, because it's the stuff that we're interested in that we know about,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is obviously not investing advice in any way, even if we were to drop the name of a company or stuff like that. But it makes sense. And I kind of suspected you would say this, Kim, because for me, one thing that I've been preaching, even though the majority of my investments are still in real estate, well, when it comes to investing in companies or becoming kind of like shareholder owner in a company, I always preach you don't need 100 different things. You rather want to have something that you're really passionate about, that you don't mind spending time on, like you and I spending time on finding out what's going on with Tesla. And if it were ever to get so boring that we don't want to do it anymore, should we really then be shareholders, right? Like, so I rather have somebody say, okay, I have a portfolio of 8 to 10 companies. That's kind of what I can keep an eye on. And as I'm doing it for my kids, then I'm doing it obviously with organizations where I know the management, I know the vision, I know what's going on. The other thing I wanted to come back to, you mentioned one of them is five. Do you think there will even be a need to go to college when a 5-year-old gets to that point?
Definitely no. No. Um, I think honestly, if I'm being completely honest, I've thought about this a lot. I think my oldest will probably go to college and he might be the only one. And I think he'll do it almost more for the experience, maybe the life. There's something to be said for that transitional period where you go from being a child living at home to an adult.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have a few years where you're sort of in this environment that helps kind of ease that transition. And also, you do make really great connections through going to college. Um, but if you're thinking about it like, how it used to be, like you go to college, you get a job, and like this is how the world works, I don't think that's necessarily the way to do it. I've also thought about like the skilled labor jobs. I could see one of my kids going into like being an electrician or something like that. I think that would be a great field, almost more important to get some kind of internship
Right.
in in something like that as opposed to, going to college, I've also told like my eldest, I'm like, if you go, I think you should look into like business, just like how to run a business and studying something like that as opposed to thinking you're just going to get a degree in something,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I don't have that choice anymore because my daughter is already on her own doing her thing and stuff, and she did exactly that traditional path that you were just describing. But I have been in asking myself, how would it be if my daughter would be like 10 or 15 or something like that? And I really think personally, if the emphasis or a significant emphasis is on this kind of social experience, kind of transitioning to be an adult, and I had to make the choice, and I know I'm very biased because that was part of my own path, I would actually go into the military and into whichever branch is basically most interesting to you, and not for a huge long period of time, but maybe 3 years or something like that. I think it is transformative when it comes to becoming an adult. And it gives you an opportunity nowadays, at least, to figure out if you feel like, oh, I'm into technology or I'm into computers or I'm into, like in my case, I was totally into flying. Now, I overdid it and stayed 22 years, but that gave me the chance to fly the jets that I wanted to fly, right? So, but I could have figured out what I'm passionate about within a few years in the military. Like I had applied to the Navy, they would have given me a chance to be on boats and ships, if that's what you're into, right?
Mhm.
Um, but the reason that I think this is potentially the better path to the other alternative, which would be not college but trade, like you
Mhm.
said, electrician, plumber, something like that, building your own business from the ground up. I like actually in that context the German model, which is where I'm originally coming from, where you would literally do an apprenticeship with somebody who is a master mason, master electrician, master plumber, whatever. And they teach you both. They teach you the trade itself, but also you see how they run their business, right?
Hmm.
And so ultimately, when you get through and when you really dedicate it and get to the point where you have to do the master exam yourself, that
Hmm.
at the latest is the point where you would then also be ready to run your own business. The reason I asked the question is more coming back to all your cool expertise about Tesla and its products is what are all the things that Optimus is going to do both in business and for us personally as individuals, let's say in 10 years from now?
I mean, personally, I'm a working mom. It's really hard to keep up with like household chores. So those will be like the first thing I'm looking forward to, laundry, dishes, cleaning up, things like that. Even, taking my dog for a walk, maybe.
Yeah,
Um, I think those are the first things. I think we're already using AI as like homework help. We're having conversations right now, and like my kids are already using AI as like a tutor
right,
because
right,
there's times, they're like my oldest, there's things he's doing that I've sort of forgotten about, certain steps in math and things like that. I'm like, I forgot. I'm like, let's, you know, ask. But obviously, AI is not perfect. You have to fact check it. It's still getting there, but it is very, very helpful. So I think having that's going to be a big thing is like you can learn whatever you want to learn. It's like I look back too, like when I'm 42. I don't like to tell everyone my age, but I'm 42. So I remember when I was first learning how to research a topic, we had to like read books.
right,
And then the internet happened. And you'd have to like research things and then it was like, well, you could just Google whatever you wanted. And now Google has turned into like AI and
right.
like it's really changed the way how we get information, and we're able to get information so fast and learn things so fast. And then you can optimize that to your learning style. Like, I mean, all that's going to be like what Optimus will do for you. You can have it do whatever. You can have it interact with people. You go into a restaurant, your waiter is probably going to be a robot. I was just thinking about that the other day. I went into Chipotle and I was like, it's so annoying that, it's not standardized sizes. People complain about this with Chipotle all the time for
Yeah.
like, sometimes you get a burrito, it's this small, sometimes it's giant. And I'm like, why is this not a robot making this already for you? Like, why is this, it doesn't have to be a humanoid robot, but like it should all be.
Yeah, and it's gonna come. I'm pretty sure we are on the path to that. I mean, the aspect, one thing that I see between what we currently call AI and what will probably be either AGI is I in humanoid form is that if I go back in my memory, I remember more things that had to do with something tactile than any kind of theory stuff. Right? Yes, I remember for different school settings how it was and how the rooms were kind of in the blackboard or whiteboard or whatever. I mean, for me, the big technology advancement was basically an overhead projector, like not internet. It tells you a
I
little bit
remember that too, though. That's
how
how it was
old I am.
as well.
But see, the thing, what I think is, it's one thing to learn something from a book or hear a teacher tell you something and then have to do a test. Envisioning if there is a humanoid teacher who is basically available to you personally, right? Like almost on a one-on-one, and you want to do like an analogy or you want to demonstrate something or you want to, like, I remember still how we took apart the frog. I remember how we did some chemistry stuff that blew up. Those kind of things are much more in my memory, much more vivid than the stuff that in some kind of theory. And so I'm thinking not only would the intensity of learning be way higher, if you ask anybody who is homeschooling their kids, they all tell you my kids do 2 school years in one normal school year easy without even
Mhm.
breaking a sweat. Now imagine you had one-on-one and you could determine when is the most applicable time, right? Like I know, for example, I'm somebody who already only really woke up to learning about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. So the
Hmm.
first hour and a half that I was there was kind of wasted time. If you knew this and you had an Optimus at home and one of your kids is kind of like a little later in the day, but then can go for 5 hours, no competition, right? Like so those kind of things is what I see. And then also being able to advance much faster to much further than
Yeah.
age, right? Almost like in a gifted program kind of thing. So I look forward to that. And I personally actually really think, like you said, right, the 5-year-old, no way, no college, no
Yeah.
need. But the other two, maybe a little bit of some of it.
Yeah.
Um, the
Now,
social,
I do worry a little bit about the social. That's what I was just going to
yeah,
say. So, my biggest fear, I would say, of all that is the social aspect,
yeah.
which I saw, with my kids during COVID because they're school aged, not going to school, like not being around other kids and learning social skills really, it's not great for your brain. I'm curious to see where our brains end up going like 25 years from now, 50 years from now. Like, where will the human brain evolve to? Because it's definitely changing. Um, Kids don't interact the way they used to interact. They want to sit around right now playing games online with their friends versus being in person with their friends. You have to force them to go outside. Like, and I don't know if those are, if like we just accept this change or what will happen. Because I
Yeah.
really think that's going to be a big downfall of all this.
Well, if we let it, I always want to say if we let it, right? Like there's um, an aspect that I felt in hindsight, looking back to the kind of progression of my daughter, is that a lot of things were so standardized that if she wanted to explore some things that she may or may not be passionate about, it was always in addition, right? If you had a certain number of credits in high school or certain classes to take for all the basic stuff, that took a certain amount of time. And I remember when she said, okay, they're offering to learn an instrument. I want to try the flute. And then one of the things was, well, that means you have to stay longer in school. It takes a different bus. It takes all kinds of. Now I'm thinking, okay, if it could be more personalized and you get your regular standard schooling out of the way 3 hours a day, then you could find out what are those additional passions and pursue them in groups. You could, and this is also a little different in Europe than to the US, and that's one of the few things that I've always missed is in Europe, a lot of things are organized in clubs, right? Whereas in the US, I feel like a lot of things are organized through different levels of school. Your high school marching band, your swim team, your gymnastics team, your sports teams, and then the same in college rather than kind of clubs where the parents pay a certain membership fee in the club and the kids can test all these different clubs to find out what am I really into, right? And have the socialization by spending time in the club doing something that they're really into, not on top of your school time that you anyway have to do 8, 9 hours a day, right? So I don't know exactly how that's going to look like, but I think the social aspect could be solved by making a few tweaks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would love that. That would be my hope is that you would have more time to pursue those passions outside of work or outside of school or outside of just staring at a computer, that you can actually like go outside more. But our brains are sort of changing where we're also like addicted to like technology and being in front of it all the time and having like that I hope that people will use it as a way for them to enjoy life more, but I don't know. And and it also is like what will happen to our economy when we don't, we're gonna like how will we make money? I mean, I think Elon's talked about some sort of like set income that we'll have to have at some point.
Yeah,
Uh, and part of you is like we get a lot of our self-worth from what we do in our lives and like who we are. A lot of that comes from what you do for work, but maybe it's not work. You're not getting paid in a sense, but you still have a purpose.
Yeah, I've heard that being said quite a few times. Um, I mean, I know, like for example, for your YouTube channel, you get money from making successful videos. But let me ask you for a second, if you have a video and that really goes ballistic and you get 1 million views and stuff like that, is the money the first thing that comes to your mind as far as happiness goes?
No, 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 no. You know, the videos that I actually feel the best about, that I'm the most passionate about, are usually the ones that don't get the views. It's
Okay,
funny. The ones that I'm like, that I feel like, oh, this was something I was so interested in, and I did all this research and I loved it, and I'm so proud of it. Those are the ones that, like, for some reason, nobody watches.
right. Okay. But if you take that one step further and say the few that do and give you really amazing comments, how does that make you feel?
Um, you know, YouTube is interesting. I feel like you ride this high every single time you post, and then just goes away, and it's like a kind of a weird cycle. It's really like probably not good for you. It's sort of like I'm like, why do you do this to yourself? It kind of like sucks you in a way. Now I've been doing it so long though that I just kind of um I've gotten away from that a little bit, but like in the beginning, there is like a weird sort of like addiction to it in a way where you're like, all right, that was really fun. And you get like a little bit of like a high from it. Let's do it again. But then if you don't do it again, you feel like bad about yourself, like, oh, why? I'm over everybody, no one likes me anymore. I'm not relevant. Maybe I didn't do, or sometimes, it's hard with the Tesla audience because um if if you do research on something other than Tesla or make, you know, a video on something else, they can turn against you a little bit.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah. I've seen that in myself, even though my channel and my content is much, much smaller in comparison. But I've seen that too. Now, the reason I brought this up about the satisfaction with the video or any content that you make is just to illustrate that there are in my opinion, so many other things other than defining ourselves and our success and satisfaction through money, right?
mhm.
That I have been preaching for a while now since I kind of mentally adopted this age of abundance as something that is coming no matter what, that we should look for the things that we're passionate about, because that's where I think, and this could be social settings, that could be technology, that for me, I'm finding researching something that I really, really want to know. It doesn't even almost matter if anybody else is interested. I can totally go down the rabbit hole for that kind of stuff, and that gives me a level of satisfaction where the money is irrelevant. And if I, especially, I can imagine it's not necessarily always the case, but often already, where I can say, I know everything is covered, right? Our household, our expenses, car, house, blah, blah, food and stuff. It's all taken care of, so I don't have to really worry about it. And so now I have the freedom to do one of those things and get the satisfaction out of it. If we really had, like Elon says, universal high income, everybody would get like $5,000 in today's money in their account every month. And if you're reasonably handling it, then you could do all these passionate
I mean,
things
I
all
feel
the
like
time.
that sounds so great in theory, but I just don't see it how it's going to happen because I don't know if I trust like all of our governments and things like that to really make it like,
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing about the way
yeah.
I have thought about it, and I have not really found a good solution, but one thing that I could imagine would be to say there is very, very likely a massive, massive improvement in productivity. If
Yeah.
we really look at what like a world with Optimus, not just for laundry and for what you and I need or for companies, but in general, if Elon were right that there would be a billion robots, not necessarily all from Tesla, the productivity gain would be so massive that systematically it would make sense to me to say, okay, the company that has that productivity gain is, as part of the community, not permitted to keep all of it to itself and get this ridiculous valuation, but to say, okay, so this productivity gain is shared. Now, I'm not saying this for
I
one
don't think that will
company.
ever happen, though. That would never happen. I mean,
But in a way,
they
it
say
happens
this
already,
stuff.
right? I mean, we have it, if you look at it, we have it in one sense when it comes to companies in capital gains tax, and we have it in the other sense in you creating something, you have productivity in your job, and part of the money you have to share in taxes.
Part, but there's still somebody on top gets like, insanely wealthy and
Well,
there's
that's for the, I think that will still continue for the people who start businesses and make businesses successful. But when it comes to society, if I say, okay, there are 300 million Americans and our um, um, GDP has increased fivefold,
yeah.
why should that increase in GDP and in generated productivity all stay with the owners of the company?
I mean, what you're saying is my hope.
Yeah, mine too. That's why I'm saying
So,
it.
I hope. I hope, but we'll
Well,
see.
it's one
I
answer
just
to the
think that
question.
like not all people, I don't know. There's a lot of like corruption, like higher up corruption, I feel like.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Politically.
ultimately, and I know nobody really likes to hear this, but I'm not afraid to say it. I hope there is a capitalist system way to distribute profit and productivity gain, because the alternative is socialism, where the government just takes everything and is even more corrupt. You
I
know,
agree.
if you look at Ukraine before the war was the most corrupt country in the world. Nobody knew where all the billions and billions ever went, or Russia for that matter. Um, so if the alternative is socialism, where you just get the crumbs so that you're not getting too antsy and that's it, versus some way how a capitalist system can distribute some of the gains, I would rather go for the latter, but
Yeah.
I'm not saying I have a good idea. I just see that this immense increase in productivity, and I would assume this is kind of what Elon says, and it kind of it's one thing when he said it's not very long ago. Then he said I can even envision that we don't need money anymore. Right?
Yeah.
Did anything pop in your mind how that would work?
I mean, I don't think of money as like, credit cards. I think we're going more into like cryptocurrency type,
Yeah.
definitely more into that realm. Um, and I think maybe that's how it will, I don't know. It's really hard to say. It's really hard to say because it's probably not in a way that we're even thinking right now.
Yeah, my what popped in my head was actually kind of something like Starship Enterprise or Star Wars and stuff, where you have replicators where you go and say, I want Chipotle, and it makes you. You don't have to go into a restaurant, right? And nobody says you have to pay me tokens or something like that, whatever kind of currency. It's just part of the system. It just happens to be there. You issued your clothing for the occupation that you have chosen to go after and stuff. I mean, in a way, if you look a little bit at what futurists have either written or have put in movies, most of the time there's never any answer to the question, okay, how is this all paid for? Or how are all the people that are on Starship Enterprise getting their salary? And do they
Mm.
ever have a chance to spend it or stuff, right? So if I think that way, the only question is, do we all do this voluntarily or will we be forced into that?
I know. I guess I think about like, I don't know if you ever read the book called The Giver.
Mhm. Yes.
I kind of think about like that future a little bit, um, where everyone has like a sort of like a job that they know is like perfect for them and that's what they're doing. But then, will everything feel black and white? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. And I mean, it's probably not very healthy to know what the future
Yeah.
holds, right? Like, so we have to live with the uncertainty to some extent. The reason I wanted to bring it up is for one, because you are involved in this technology stuff, but I think the balance that you have found with looking also a little bit on your family and what it means in general for family, really to me, and you're so much closer, I'm really grateful that you're here to talk about that, is a little bit, okay, you have the kids in this age range
Hmm.
If some of the people that I'm listening to, and I suspect you listen to, are correct, what happens in just even 10 years? So the oldest is 24 and 21 and 15. If most of what they say is happening in 10 years, let alone 15 years, it feels almost like, how do you tell anybody, they're not really babies anymore. How do you tell somebody anything what they should prepare for when everything is so completely changing?
I think it's really important for people, like my advice for people would be like to find out what interests you and try to like really find out things that you enjoy. Like what do you enjoy? What brings you happiness in life and make that your focus no matter what you're doing. Like, what do you feel like brings you purpose? Like, do you feel like your family, art, the outdoors, um, you know, or else, I think people are going to go into this, like obviously abundance is amazing, but it also there's the dark side of it, which is depression because you don't have a purpose. So you need to really, I think, find out what you enjoy doing
Right,
and find out more
exactly.
about
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, and I think as parents, we have kind of like part of the role is to say, even if you may not know that it might be something you enjoy, let's make it a possibility to have some exposure to as many different things. And you may be surprised that it's sport or it's
Yeah.
music or it's
As
theater
much,
or it's art
yeah.
or whatever.
As much as my son hated me, I made him do band in middle school because I said, you got to try it out, learn how to read music,
Yeah.
see if you like it. If you don't have to do it forever, but try it.
Yeah, exactly. So with all that being said, what can people expect from Kim in her videos in the stuff that you're putting out? Anything that you can already tell that you're planning?
I feel like every couple years, the channel kind of goes through like a change with what my focus is. I have like, kind of like Taylor Swift, there's like the different eras. I feel like this year it's definitely going to go deeper into AI. That is, the world changing. That's where I'm going. I'm going to be not just with Tesla, with NVIDIA, with, all these different technologies, self-driving, robotaxis. I think this next year we're going to see a lot more robotaxi startups. I've already saw that at CES, kind of when I was looking ahead at, what everything was about. AI was everywhere, AI everything. Um, and how we start to transition everything into that focus in our homes, in our life, in our families. Um, and that's definitely going to be probably over the next couple years where the channel is going to go.
Okay, yeah, that's very cool, and I'm excited to see your perspective on that. One thing, last question I wanted to ask you is, it seems to me that we are currently in this phase where pretty significant players around the world seem to say America first, Europe first, Canada first, China first, and you can make the list longer and longer. Do you see any, or do you have any concerns what that could do to the technology? And, I'm asking it basically because I know so many people in our community, if I add myself to it, who speak about the total addressable market for something, for the cars or for the robots or for the semi or for the AI technology or for the future when SpaceX IPOs and we all gonna have a little bit of both and stuff.
Mm.
But I feel there's always the assumption of, and I'm gonna use it, I'm gonna get probably bad comments about it. Like there's a little bit of this belief in kumbaya. And when I really look into the world, then I don't see that very much. I see more like we need to separate, we need to identify our tribe and that kind of stuff. What do you see happening there in that space?
I mean, we're in an interesting place right now because I feel like we're about to head into like a world war. I feel like it's going to get more and more. I mean, I would love the kumbaya. I would love that. But I don't see that happening. I feel like it's going to get more and more separate because, with technology, our government worries more about spies and like things like that within like our own CIA and things, that sort of side of it. And like technology is one of those areas that makes it easier. for different countries to kind of tap into it. And I think security is going to become like a huge issue. So that is part of it for sure. I think even with like the self-driving cars and the cameras and all of that, I don't think it's going to get closer together. I actually think it's probably going to be the opposite.
Yeah, I'm afraid of that too, but part of the reason I asked the question is when you look, certain capabilities, at least right now, and I would say a lot of them are not very quick where you can say, well, just give me 6 months, I train somebody on it and then they do it. At least in the moment and probably for the next few years, there are certain capabilities that are localized in certain places around the world. Right?
Yeah.
Just to give an example, there was just some rumor yesterday. I don't know if it's true or not, but it is likely that the hand for Optimus and the pieces to make the hand probably come from companies in China,
I
right?
wouldn't be surprised. I feel like everything these days, I mean, China is very advanced. I
Yeah,
was,
especially in this kind of nitty-gritty, super precision, super little, right? You don't want to see like super
yeah,
bulky arms or anything like that in a robot. So why I'm bringing this up is more to say, okay, this is probably a true statement, at least for some of the components. If we don't like each other enough, Optimus could stop that in its track, no, and in a way where you really don't have an alternative. You can't just say, okay, make a new company somewhere in the United States that's going to make precision actuators to that level, at least not quickly. I mean, not saying it's
not
impossible.
quickly, but isn't that a lot of what Tesla does is where they like to do as much as possible in-house compared to other companies?
Right, that's true. But take a look at what happened, just as one example. I think it was about 3 years ago, around that Elon said over and over and over again, I want people in the United States to refine lithium. Please
Hmm.
go, please refine lithium. It's a permission to print money on and on. Nobody did it, and then they did exactly like you said. They said, well, if nobody wants to do it, then we do it.
Yeah.
That thing has just now, 3 years later, started to put the first pound of lithium out, right? I'm not saying we cannot learn how to do it, but not being able to, for example, manufacture Optimus for 3 or 4 years until we have figured out how to make all the components ourselves is a big impact to all the things that we discussed today. And that's just one example. That's why I'm more hopeful that we really end up maybe not in the full kumbaya, but a little, a little
I mean, I would
kumbaya.
hope that we can continue stuff like that. I guess, you know, my hope is that we would be able to do that. But like knowing that like, we can't have our Chinese cars are not we're not allowed to buy them
Yeah,
here
or
in
look
the
at NVIDIA,
US.
right? Like the chips that we basically first said we forbid you to have them, and then when we said now you can have them, they said, well, now we don't want them anymore. That is kind of like, kindergarten to me, but
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely will slow down technology there. I mean, for sure, if we can't work together. Um, it's more, I think, like at like another level that I don't know as much about with which gets to the political level and like what's going on with our worldwide governments, and the situation that that's sort of headed into right now.
yeah, I just feel like for people that put information out on YouTube and podcasts and stuff like you and I do, it is a component that we shouldn't completely glance over and at least have in the back of our minds and keep our audience aware that there are certain things that are dependencies. Yes, you hear the loud political stuff, but there are real life dependencies. And when we try to speculate what's the share price going to do, or when is the technology to actually launch, or when will you have the first one so you don't have to do the household chores anymore, a lot of those things are dependent on at least reasonably workable relationships, right? And
Oh
so
yeah, definitely. I mean, at CES, which I don't know if your audience knows, the largest consumer electronics show in the world. Pretty much everything I felt like came from China to some degree. It might be a US company, but like, where do all those parts come from that are in the US product? They like China for sure. And a lot of the products that I deal with, that sponsor our channel, are Chinese made products. Like I'm dealing with somebody in China talking to somebody. Like it's just the way technology is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got into the verge a few times, right? When they had these kind of really big struggles, and there was a threat that no more iPhones would come.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff. And I think most people don't even think about the fact that pretty much every iPhone comes from over there.
I
So
think most people just don't like to think about it.
yeah, because I think we're in a sense political from a proud where do we belong perspective. And I think at least most of the people I know are not political to fight with each other or
Yeah.
with somebody
Yeah.
else, right? And not the goal is not to make enemies. The goal is to find some common ground to get something done, right? So, okay, Kim, it was wonderful to have you and
Yes,
spend the
thank you so
time.
much.
What can people do? I mean, if they haven't heard about you before, where do they go? What's the name of the channel and how to get in touch?
Yeah, the channel on YouTube is 𝐀𝐚𝐥, and you can find me everywhere else at 𝐞𝐴𝐞𝐵 on X, Instagram, TikTok, and then our podcast is Trending in Tesla, which if you like to watch it visually, you can just watch it on our YouTube channel, or you can listen to it in your car or wherever.
Yeah, very good. And so we're going to put all of that in the show notes, obviously, and also in the notes on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and so forth. So if you like this, please like, subscribe, ring the bell, all these good things so that the algorithm knows what to do. Kim, thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much.